Welcome. This is a little tutorial for the approach in Innsbruck, localizer DME East approach. We will be using the default Boeing 737-800 with 50% fuel on board. We'll take off runway 8 and land runway 26. We will be using the chart 11-1 for Innsbruck, and we will set our weather in FSX so that we have a layer of clouds from 5,000 to 8,000. And we'll be using the following nav aids, NDB at Rattenberg and the localizer DME timer, and we won't be using the GPS. We will do a procedure turn during this approach, which will consider flying heading of 018 for 2 minutes from the NDB, and then right turn to intercept a radial of 048 on a bearing of 228 back to Rattenberg. Let's go right ahead and pull up the chart. So to find the chart, just go to your favorite browser and type in LOWI charts. And we will be looking for the jet view LOWI Innsbruck 13 charts PDF. Upon opening this, you'll see a bunch of charts, SIDS and stars. So if you scroll all the way to the end, you'll have the approach charts, which are shown in color here because of the high terrain around the airport. Just rotate the chart so that you have it upright. In Chrome, which I'm using, you can use this icon, and we will be looking for chart 11-1. So let's just look at 11-4, 11-3, 11-2. Here is 11-1. This is the chart we're going to be using, with the map and the profile view at the bottom. 11-1 and 11-1. So we have the correct chart. The nav aids are shown on the chart. So the NDB Rattenberg has a frequency of 303, and it is shown on the chart with this circle here, and the box gives the frequency and the ident. Also, we need to fly the localizer DME Oscar Echo Victor, which has a frequency of 111.1 and a track of 255. Now the procedure turn will be performed just before starting the approach. So we'll take off runway 08, fly to the NDB. Upon overflying the NDB, we'll fly a heading of 018, so almost north, for 2 minutes, and then we'll do a right turn to intercept radial 048 and back to the NDB on a heading of 228. So it's going to be like a teardrop turn, the shape of a teardrop, and we'll continue the approach from there. For now, we will get into FSX, and we will set our weather for a cloud cover or cloud layer, 5,000 to 8,000 with 3/4 of a mile inside that layer. So let's start by going into free flight and selecting our airplane. We will use the Boeing 737 Pacifica, and we will select the airport, LOWI for Innsbruck, and we want to depart runway 8. There we go. And now we're going to set our weather. Now the first thing is to select fogged in and hit OK, so that will load up this weather, and then you can go back in and modify it. So we'll go to user define, customize, go to the advanced weather button, and here we are on the clouds tab. We have 2 layers of clouds. The blue one is the one selected, and the top and base are shown on the right. So as soon as we click on it, you will see the numbers change for the base. Let's bring that one up to 12,000, so it's above us. We'll be flying at 9,500. The bottom layer, that's the one we want to fly through with no visibility. So we'll start it at 8,500. Another way to change the top and base is to type the numbers right in. So 8,000 and 5,000. We won't need to mess up with the types of clouds since we've selected the fogged in theme. All the clouds are already selected as we wish. No precipitation. And now we can go to the visibility, and we will set up a layer for the visibility same as the cloud layer, so 8,000 to 5,000. So within that cloud layer we'll have a visibility. Let's put it to 3/4 of a mile. There we go. Hit OK. So we're back to the main page, and all we have to do all that's left to do is to set the time, and let's put it at daytime. Make sure we can see the scenery, because it's going to be beautiful. You can save the file at this point if you want to come back again and fly it. And let's get into the aircraft. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is to set our fuel. We want to have about 50% fuel. Let me fiddle around with it here so that you're able to see what I'm doing when I go to the fuel menu. Just give me a second. First of all, I'm gonna show you what it looks like. See how the clouds cover mountain tops. Pretty nice. Okay, let's try to go in the fuel menu. Go to aircraft, fuel and payload. And you're not seeing this, so let me change this around. There we go. So now if we go to the aircraft menu and fuel and payload, we can change fuel. Let's put all 3 tanks to 50%. Okay, so now let's set up our autopilot. First, let's set our altimeter, because in this weather theme the altimeter does not match standard. So, and this PFD here, I like to have the compass rose instead of the arc. So hitting the center button will change that, and use the APP mode on that button so that you get your glide slope when you do the approach. We'll activate our auto throttle, set the speed to 210. That's a good speed for the climb we're going to be doing. We are on the heading of 079 sitting on the runway, so we'll set our heading bug to 079. Always a good idea upon departure. We will fly this approach at 9,500, so we'll climb directly to that altitude. So let's set that in our altitude. And if you want to see where that comes from, I'll show you on the approach chart. There we go. So you see that the procedure turn will be done at 9,500 and the approach starts at 9,500. So this is where I selected the altitude. And our climb will be at about 2,500 feet per minute, because we want to stay above the glide slope flying out of the airport. We do not want to get under. Now if we go back to the chart, you'll see that this ILS has a track of 255 or course 255. So we're going to set that in our course indicator. So back to the airplane. Let's change the course to 255. Now, autopilot is set. Next thing we want to set is the flaps. We will be using flaps 5 degrees, so that's 3 notches. Here's one. Let me use my button. 2 more notches. And we have flaps 5. We will set our trim to around 3.5 degrees. Here's 3.5. It's very useful to have those labels. That's an option in your display settings. Okay, so next step is to set our radio frequencies. So we remember that we had 11.1, 11.1 for the ILS, so we'll put that in both nav1 and nav2. Double check that from the chart. So 111.1 for the ILS and 303 for the NDB. Let's complete the nav1 and nav2. Switch them to active and ADF radio set to 303. There we go. So our frequencies are tuned in. I think we're pretty much ready to go. Just bear in mind, I'm not going to be flying this like a real life pilot. The main goal of this video is to show you navigation. So I will be using the default airplane navigation systems. There are more sophisticated and more realistic navigation instruments in pay-aware airplanes, but just want you the basics of navigation. Also want to show you this scenery when you fly above the cloud cover. That's very nice. As for the timer, we have one in this aircraft. So upon doing the procedure turn, we will be using the timer, which is to the left of the MFD. I'll show you a close-up view of this and how it works. Okay, the timer is over here. At the top left button starts the timer. The needle starts moving, counting the seconds, and the minutes will be displayed in the bottom window. If you click once more, it stops, and once more resets. So that's what we will be using for our timer. Right, I think we're all set. Everything is tuned in, and we're ready to go. So we'll fly runway heading upon departure and activate our speed hold, then our autopilot master switch, altitude hold, and heading hold, in that order. And then we'll use the heading bug to get back on the ILS or on the localizer. Gear up. Speed hold, autopilot master, altitude hold, and heading hold. And we'll be changing our bank limit to 25. We don't want the airplane to turn too steeply and when the autopilot makes a turn. Okay, we have the localizer to our left, so we'll turn left a few degrees. Now we're flying the ILS or the localizer backwards. So 255 is our course, so the heading we're flying is 075 on the localizer, but right now we're off to the right, so we'll go a few degrees left, bring it back in. I see the cloud cover, how it hides the mountain tops. Now we're already at 4,500. We should be getting inside that layer shortly. And here comes the ILS. Let's go back to 075. And we're in the soup. Nothing to see outside. So at this point we're flying by instruments only. We're climbing through 5,600. Do a final check after takeoff. So we have our autopilot, heading hold is on, altitude, master switch, speed hold, speed is 210, everything looks good on that side. Just make sure that everything matches our display. 200 on the speed, 2500 on the rate of climb. Flaps, we'll keep it at 2 degrees, so I raised 1 notch. That's a good flap setting for the speed we're going at. Now we're almost above the cloud layer, 8,000, so let's keep an eye out. Let's go left a little more. And here we go, cleared the cloud. Now look at this. See those mountain tops peeking through the cloud layer. It's very nice. Now as we get near the top of our climb, 9,500, let's reduce our rate of climb, otherwise passengers will have a feeling they're in a roller coaster as we level off. They don't like negative G's usually. Very nice. This is just default FSX weather. I imagine using an add-on would be even more beautiful than that. And now we need to watch for our NDB. So this needle here, we can select it. That's the blue needle on the PFD. There we go. This blue needle now points to the RTT NDB. Rattenberg, and when it points to 030, which is opposite of 210, if you look at the chart, that's when we will turn towards the NDB. And that should happen at around 21 nautical miles DME, or 21 DME from the ILS. Right now, if you look at the bottom right of the PFD, we're at 15 miles. So I'll be using the heading bug to turn the airplane, so make sure we keep an eye on that. And I also reduced my speed to 200. We want to be ahead of the airplane all the time. We don't want to be doing that procedure turn any faster than 200. Otherwise it makes a very wide turn. We want to stay as close to the NDB as possible. We're now at 17 miles, almost 18. So that left turn will be coming up soon. You see the blue needle is slowly moving towards 030. Miles. And we're about a mile short of 21, so now it's good time to start the turn. And you see the blue needle's moving faster, so we'll be chasing that needle to 030. Now at this point it doesn't matter if you overshoot a little bit, as long as you're really close to 030. I think this turn is looking good. Here's 030. That's pretty close. So now we're flying direct to the Rattenberg VOR on a heading of 030, opposite of 210. Round radial 210. Enjoy the mountain tops. Now if you watch this needle as we overfly the NDB, it will swing around, and that's when we're going to start our timer and do a left turn to 018, which is 30 degrees off the outbound heading from that NDB. Outbound heading is 048 if you look at the chart, so we go 30 degrees off to the left, 018. Only 6.5 miles to that NDB, so we should be there in a second. There we go. If you see the needle, it swings around. Now we can start the timer. Time for 2 minutes, and start our turn to 018. If you overshoot this NDB a little bit, it doesn't really matter, as long as you turn within the 5 to 6 seconds after you passed it. This is a procedure turn. It doesn't have to be precise like flying a VOR or an ILS. You'll see actually the blue needle is pointing a little bit off to the left. You look at the bottom of the needle. It's okay for a procedure turn. We're really close. So we're about 45 seconds into the procedure turn now. We'll go for 2 minutes and then start our turn to the right. See 1 minute is displayed in the bottom window of the timer. So we are in the second minute. Still at 9,500. this matches our altitude indicator, and you can double check on the top there so that we have the correct altimeter setting. 200 knots, heading 018, 2 notches of flaps, actually 5 notches of flap, 5 degrees. We're about 20 seconds from our turn. Now we will do this turn manually, so I can deactivate this heading. It's gonna stay there, and we're gonna set our next turn, which will be 228. And you notice here that I made a mistake. I put 248, so I'll be 20 degrees off, but it's okay. It should have been 228. Okay, we're 2 minutes into the procedure turn, so we're going to start the turn. Now make sure you pick a pitch or a bank angle and keep it. Do not vary the bank angle. If it varies too much, your turn is going to look awful. You're not going to end up where you need to be. For this to work, you need to have a constant speed. We're at 200 and staying at 200 knots. And we're at about 25 degrees of bank, and we stay at 25 degrees of bank. As close as we can to this. This should work out pretty good. This blue needle will swing slowly towards 248. We'll do it on 248. And we're remaining at 9,500 during all this turn. The needle keeps swinging towards the 248. Actually, if I had selected 228, that would have been a very nice turn. That would have been actually pretty much on the money. But I made the mistake, so we'll live with it. You see that, thinking I was going for 248, I was a little short of my turn, so I rolled out on a 30-degree offset, and it's actually 58-degree offset. Calculation mistake on my part, but that will bring the needle back towards 248. Slowly turning back towards the NDB. Now things are going to go fast a little after we pass the NDB, because as we pass the NDB, we're going to need to make a left turn towards heading of 210. If you refer back to the chart, you'll see that's indicated after Rattenberg VOR. It's a we fly radial 210 from the NDB until we're established on the localizer. Now the glide slope is not going to come up before the localizer. The localizer will be displayed before the glide slope. Now to fly this, I use the approach button on the autopilot, but you cannot activate the approach button until you have the glide slope and you're below it. And you'll see when the glide slope appears, we'll already be in our turn to line up on the VOR, on the localizer, and we will be almost on the glide slope. So it's going to go fast. So instead of activating approach, we will be, here's the localizer. Instead of activating the approach button, we will be activating the VOR localizer button, which will catch the glide slope. Here's the needle swinging. We're over the NDB. So we turn to 210, and we only have 6.5 miles to fly before we catch up the localizer. So the VOR log will catch the localizer, and as soon as the glide slope indicator appears, we'll activate the approach button, and that will catch the glide slope. Now, before we get to the localizer, we need to slow down a little bit, because we don't want to descend at 200. We'll be descending at about 160, so we'll slowly bring our speed down. So let's activate the VOR log right now. That will take care of the localizer. Let's slow down to about let's say 180 for now. We can add 1 notch of flaps or 2 as we slow down. There you go. That's the localizer being caught by the autopilot. I'm not turning the airplane, the autopilot is. And you see we still don't see the glide slope, but it will show up any second now. The blue needle, not the blue, but the green needle points to the localizer, so you see how close it is to the 255 heading right now. So our speed is at 180, slowing down. And keep an eye on the second screen, the PFD. You'll see the glide slope show up in a second now. We'll slow down a little more, 170. And now again, add another notch of flaps, and here's the glide slope. So as soon as we hit it, you see how close it is. We hit the APP button, and that will make sure that the autopilot catches the glide slope. So as soon as the glide slope is caught, let's add another notch of flaps. As soon as the glide slope is caught, the altitude hold turns off, and the heading hold turned off when we activated the VOR localizer. So now the airplane is descending on the glide slope. We'll drop the gear to create some drag. It's a steep descent here, about 1200 feet per minute. Let's slow down to 160 and add the rest of the flaps. And now we are configured to land, so we have our landing approach speed. Slowing down slowly to 160. Our gear is down, our flaps are down. Very nice. We'll be descending in that cloud layer. Okay, we're getting on the glide slope. Everything should stabilize pretty nice. We're getting back on the localizer. We overshot a little bit. Descending through 8, and here's the cloud cover. Now we're inside the cloud cover. Speed looking good. We're on the localizer, on the glide slope, on speed. Our approach is still activated. Speed hold is still activated. Now keep an eye on all these. You never know when one is going to be turned off inadvertently, and then things go crazy. It messes up your approach. So always review everything all the time. Do your scan. Scan your instruments. Okay, we're pretty much stabilized. 1200 feet per minute. Everything looks good. 1200 feet per minute, steady. We're passing 6,500 now. Another 1,500 to go before we clear the clouds. $6,200. You see see that during an approach like that, there's not a lot of time to think about anything else. We're 10 miles from the localizer, or DME 10 on the localizer. And this localizer is 5 degrees offset to the runway center line. So the final landing will be done manually. We have 500 to go. We'll need to line up manually with the runway and do the landing. The 200 feet to go. Keep an eye out. You'll see that we will be clearing that cloud layer any second now. And here we go. Right underneath it. How cool is that? And here's the airport and the runway. You see we're offset with the runway, so we will need to take control at a certain point and line up with the runway manually. So now notice your N1 before you disengage the auto throttle, and then move your stick, your throttle, to get back to the same setting as you saw, about 54% in our case, in order to maintain the same speed. Otherwise you might be full throttle not knowing it. Okay, autopilot is off. Now we're flying manually. All we need to do is try to stay on the glide slope. We're leaving the localizer. Localizer needle will swing to the right, but that's okay. We don't fly the localizer anymore, but we want to try to stay on the glide slope as much as we can. That will take us down to very close to the runway. You can also use the PAPI lights as we're doing now to make sure we're not too low. And we're gently bringing the speed down, so I'm trimming nose up a little bit to slow down. Try to maintain about 145 around that speed to land. PAPI lights will guide us in. By 900 feet per minute at 150. It's pretty good to stay on the glide slope. On the speed. Try to maintain center line as much as possible. And 50 feet, 40, 30, and a little flare, idle, gentle touch, reversers on the brakes. Not a very long runway, so we use the brakes, and there we go. We flew the approach into Innsbruck. Let me taxi this airplane off the runway, and then we'll look at a replay of the landing, and I want to show you the map also. Bring our flaps up and clean the airplane. And we'll taxi past this line here. That's the old short line. We want to have our tail past this line. Make sure we don't interfere with any other traffic on the runway. There we go. Park and brake. Let's go to the replay. Watch this. I think 2 minutes. 120 seconds should be good. We're in the aircraft. That's the replay. Let's go to the tower view. See, when you come in with the 737, you want your nose gear to be slightly above the main gear, just as it is now. So that you need to find the speed with the weight that you have that will give you that. And your flare is only a few degrees. There you go. You don't want that nose be pointing up too high. Want that main gear, that nose gear, to get on the ground slowly but as soon as possible. Decent landing, I think. Okay, map is not available when you're in the replay. Let's press escape. And let's go to the map. And that's the flight pattern we just did. Let's zoom in a little bit. Okay, we flew along the ILS outbound, turned toward the RTT NDB, which is there, and we flew heading a 018 for 2 minutes, came back around, back to the NDB, and back to the localizer and landed. I think that's pretty much how it should work. Well, thanks for watching, and if you go back to the chart, we just flew that same approach we saw on the map. So that to 110 from the NDB after we did our procedure turn, and back on the localizer 225 and to the runway. See, it says here that the localizer is offset 5 degrees from runway center line 260. I should have shown you that at the beginning, but there it is. Well, thanks for watching. Hope you appreciate it. If you have comments, please let me know. We'll catch you next time, hopefully, for another video. Bye.